Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about what's happening with ad revenue in 2023. I'd like to encourage everyone to participate in the questions section to drop in questions as you go. We're going to try and address them when they're relevant. We don't want to just wait till the end and have a bunch of questions. We want to make sure that this is conversational. We're getting your questions answered as they pop up. So don't hesitate to throw them in there, and I'll make sure that they get presented to the panel. Who we have today, we have Jason, who is our CEO. He'll be running through a lot of data with you guys and giving you some information. And then we also have Anthony Barena, our CRO, Nick Brandstatter, our CTO, Noah Forrester, our CPO, and Anthony Alexander from our direct sales team to answer questions across the spectrum of what's affecting ad revenue. With that, Jason, I will hand it on over to you and let you run with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stacy. And by introduction, that is Stacy, the amazing Stacy Willis. She is our SVP of marketing. So thank you for putting this together, and thank you for everyone for joining. This is going to be an awesome webinar. We're going to go over some trends, some data that we found, as well as allow insights into what's going on. As Stacy had mentioned, we want this as interactive as possible. So any questions you have along the way, whether it's what is going on, how we're fixing things, or how we're approaching things, any new products we're building, anything you want, please put in the chat. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So with that being said, some of the things we're going to go over today are historical trends, the predictions for 2023, some industry trends, how advertisers we think are responding to this, and Anthony Alexander will go in depth in this, what publishers can be doing, so what you as a publisher can do to kind of combat some of the macro effects that are going on, and of course how Playwire is going to personally be responding to these, which hopefully, either if you work with us, great, you'll be benefiting from these things. If you don't work with us, we encourage you to do it regardless. So first thing we're going to discuss is 5-year ad revenue trends. What have we seen in the last 5 years as far as data? We have data going all the way back from since 2007 when we first started Playwire, was also known as Intergy, and some of the data that we've compiled up till now. So what does a normal seasonal chart look like? So in a normal chart, in a normal year, you'd see, Q1, Q2, Q3, and then obviously the big spike in Q4. And that's what a traditional trajectory would look like for any typical website. So fast forward, what would 5 years look like? We went back even 5 years of data, and as you can see, the trajectory is exactly the same. Q1, Q2, Q3, up in Q4. And then what happens? Bam, COVID hits. So performance in 2021 and 2022 was about 30% higher than normal. And the thing we want to kind of, I guess articulate to everybody is that I know everyone got really used to these 30% higher rates, all the frothiness that was in the industry. The reality is what had happened is we just got back to some kind of normality where rates came down 30%. It's not that anything has changed. We just need to go back to some kind of equilibrium. So think about it as a balloon that kind of expanded and just kind of contracted back to what it normally was before. And I think that's a really big takeaway because everyone's saying, well, why are CPMs so down? Why is our revenue off? The reality is it's not traditionally off as we would know it. It was just artificially inflated by COVID numbers, by I guess macroeconomics that were happening back then. Everyone was just, I guess, very eager to spend money. The government was pouring billions of dollars into the ecosystem. So all these things translated into what we see today as a 30% lift. The other problem we're facing is in 2022 in Q1 of 2023, we're still seeing those effects. And what's happening now is things are starting to normalize. So that's kind of what we're seeing for COVID as far as a 5-year trend. So experts and research. Sorry, go ahead, Stacey.
Before we move into the next one, I do have a question for you. How are layoffs and potential recessions going to affect revenue in the near term?
Great question, actually. So I think just like the ad industry, just like the way CPMs are inflated by 30%, I think what we're seeing is everyone got really eager when we had those great COVID numbers, and everyone's expecting this kind of upward trajectory up and to the right. What we're seeing is just everyone kind of coming back to some normality. Everyone overhired, they over-indexed, they over-projected, and everyone's just saying, hey, wait a minute, it's not going to happen as we intended. You're going to see some other factors that get involved where advertisers are flocking to a different methodology around what they're looking for. Everyone's very exuberant. They're willing to spend a lot of brand dollars. They're willing to do a lot of experimentation. We're not seeing that in the ecosystem right now. And Anthony and some of my team are going to talk to that later in other slides. So moving on, experts and researchers predictions for 2023. Great. So even though we have our own data, right? And our own data is saying, listen, there's going to be we were over-indexed by 30%. Things have normalized back to normal, so they're down by 30% this year. But this is only exacerbated by other media outlets. So why are things down 30%? So one, we're going to see a very sluggish first half. That's been verified by third parties like Magna and the Standard Media Index. And there's not only where they're macroeconomics and they're deteriorating macroeconomics and the outlook that's going to happen, but there's also not going to be any Olympics. There's no FIFA World Cup. There's no midterm elections, and all these things are feeding into lower rates, lower and less demand. Therefore, I guess less dollars for everyone that's going to spread around. So I was recently at the IAB, and while I was at the IAB, there were a few takeaways I wanted to share with the group that I thought were super important to kind of get across. And there's a lot of data in here that I think everyone should understand. So the first thing is the IAB sent around this survey to around 223 respondents of C-level or executive level leadership. And most of these are brands and agencies. The brands and agencies made up 84% of the total pie of these respondents. And from that data, we got all kind of interesting information. So in 2022, there was almost a 9 to 10% lift in revenue going into the ad ecosystem and CPM. So everyone was flush with cash, rates were up. We're only seeing about a 6% increase this year. So obviously you can see it's a downward trajectory. Everyone's a little bit bearish about what's going on. The next thing that we wanted to look at is, what's the focal point for advertisers and agencies? Where are they looking to spend their dollars? How are they looking to deploy their capital? And more than 1/3 of all buyers cited increased brand equity and improving media efficiencies as their top goals for 2023. So let me dilute that down. What does that mean? The number one thing, 61% of respondents said to acquire new customers, 43% were increased brand equity, and 35% were improved media efficiencies. Translation, they're looking to buy for cheaper, get their dollar to go further, and extract more out of their media dollars. So it's going to be a very performance-based driven, ROI-driven media ecosystem, which is normal, right? So when COVID, everyone went to this kind of different methodology on how they were deploying their capital. They were going around more, I guess, supporting causes, and it was all about like, how can I get behind these special causes? Same thing's happening right now in this environment where they're looking for more performance-based advertising, and that's going to have an effect on all of us. So how can we get better viewability, better click rates? That's what they're going to be looking for, and efficiencies. First party data. So kind of like, when you think about real estate, what's, location, location, location. Same thing for real estate on your site. Everything's going to be about better visibility and first party measurement. So as you, the publisher, you're actually sitting in a very good position, which we're going to articulate later how we're going to help you with this. But the reality is, with the cookies going away in 2024, they need a way to kind of identify who these audiences are. How can I find this audience? How can I measure them up? How can I do attribution? And the only way to do that is by marrying data, first party data, with the audience data, with the advertising data. And what we're trying to figure out is how to do that. And Nick's going to talk later about some of the steps that we're taking to ensure that we're marrying up the data. So what we're seeing is when you actually marry up a user to an audience, we're seeing 100% lift in CPM. So it's important that we get as much information and we're matching as much data as humanly possible. Another big thing is kind of just understanding the cadence of how people are looking at their media programs, how often they're looking at it, how often are they making changes. So 45% of all respondents said they're going to change or look at their media plans at least once a week. 6% are going to do it daily. So 50% of all media plans are going to be looked at and scrutinized every single day or every single week. That's incredibly different than it was a year ago, where they used to have a plan, they let it run for a month or a quarter, take the data and look at it. Now everyone's looking at every dollar, every penny, and they want to make sure they're spending their dollars wisely. And we're going to talk later on how this is going to translate into some of the things that we're doing that we hope you do in the future. So what does it all boil down to? They want the campaigns, they want more flexible campaigns, which means potentially more cancellations. If you're not hitting their KPIs, you're not hitting their viewability metrics, you're not hitting their click metrics, they'll most likely request that this campaign get canceled. They're going to be doing fewer experiments, so less, I guess, of these campaigns that just we don't know what's going to happen. They're less trial and error, shorter campaign durations and shorter flights. So instead of having quarter-long programs, maybe a month, maybe a week, maybe a day. But you know what? How do we turn lemons into lemonades? What are the things that we're doing? Anthony, can you kind of talk about some of the stuff that how do we take some of this negative energy and turn it into positive energy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of different brands that have a lot of different goals. And for us, we just try to be as malleable, flexible as we possibly can to kind of support the many needs of our advertisers and align their interests with that of our publishers. So we're doing things like changing the economics of our packages, lowering our minimums for certain formats, changing our formats, frankly. We used to have this very large rate card with a multitude of different formats, and we've really reduced the quantity of what we sell and really got into the things that we see brands buying the most, and then trying to advise our partners to lean into those formats as well. We've developed an ISR team to help us continually hunt. We're doing surveying of our audiences so we can provide different sets of data and information back to our brands and give them deeper understandings. We're aligning with, I'll say, different measurement partners to help us better understand how our campaigns are performing. So there's a lot of things that we're doing to just try to, again, remain flexible, but also solve these new problems that the advertisers are bringing to us.
Great, thank you so much. We talk about KPIs. What are the KPIs that the agencies and brands are looking to hit? 'Cause I know that's kind of a metric that's always thrown out there. What's your KPI? What are you doing? But I know there's very specific deliverables that we're always being held to, and I would love you to kind of translate that so everyone knows what are we being held to.
Yeah, I mean, viewability is obviously very important here. For the direct sales side, especially, it's kind of like showing up to the game with your pads on. Great, you've showed up. You can now play the game. Then the game starts. And things like click-through rate, VCR, engagement rate, these are the things that are, I'll say, standard for us that we're always constantly being asked to optimize towards. But more recently, we've got into more brand lift studies and understanding purchase intent and marketability, and if they're going to actually lean into the product or service. So I think getting beyond a couple of those normal standard KPIs, the click-through rates, the VCR, the engagement rates, et cetera, you're going to start seeing more of that as brands look to see how their media dollars are working for them.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. Stacey, are there any questions from the audience around this, or should we keep going?
I have two questions ready. I didn't know, Anthony, if you'd like to finish going through where we see investment first. We'll see if we answer any of them, and then I'll pop them in at the close of this section.
Absolutely. So as Jason articulated earlier, while ad investment has slowed in 2023, it's still going to be slightly up. I think it was roughly 5%. We see a huge focus on multicultural marketing right now. And we've developed some amazing products here, and we're spearheading those with various partners. But this whole notion of equality in how ads are dispersed and measurement of that is something that we see just almost every brand talking about right now. I know, my team's going out to conferences and having a lot of discussions, and literally whether you're a kids account, a gaming account, a CPG, a QSR, et cetera, all of them are talking about ways to reach different multicultural audiences for their campaign. Metaverse is a hot topic. Metaverse, Web3. You're seeing brands just dive headfirst into Roblox and Minecraft and some of these other spaces. And, we see that continuing, right? We see the engagement, the time spent, the mere scale that, a service like a Roblox would provide. So you see brands that maybe typically aren't kid-centric investing money into those kinds of platforms because, again, those customers or those kids, those younger generations become customers later on. Linear television is declining, and over the next 5 years, we see it going to steadily decline. And where's that money going? It's going into OTT, where it's more measurable. There's more control there. I still think there's some cleanup that needs to happen, but you're seeing an incredible amount of scale head that way. And then last but not least, data. I mean, this is the thing that kind of binds everything that we're doing for our partners and for our advertisers, helping our advertising partners make more informed decisions there. You know, and I would give one caveat of, yes, things are going towards CPA, more conversion-based tactics, but with privacy laws, CCPA, GDPR, and heck, all these states lately are creating their own set of privacy laws. That's becoming more complicated. Conversions is becoming more complicated because the lack of data and the quality of data that exists. So, you know, these will be the kind of the core four things that at least we've been seeing lately.
Great. And then I have a couple questions here. The first one is around what our outlook is on kids-specific vertical in the UK or in Europe as a whole, actually.
Yeah, I mean, look, kids in general is always going to be a very important sector for us. And I think, you know, it's only becoming more complicated with the things like COPPA 2.0 potentially adjusting the age limitations of standard COPPA law, potentially upwards to 18. So in terms of our kids brand still leading in, absolutely. Now, I will say supply demand issues still exist, right? Very popular kids toy brands that we work with every single quarter had several campaign cancellations simply predicated around lack of their product on shelves. So even though COVID is, you know, done, there's still that supply chain issue on some of those fronts. So I see kids movies leaning in, I see kids toys leaning in, I see CPG and QSR mainly here in the US, but at the end of the day, you know, it's going to continue to rise and only become more complicated as that whole teen segment gets into the mix here.
Awesome. And then the only other question, which I believe was answered for the most part, but I'd love to see if there's anything else you add, which is how our direct sales team specifically is changing the way we work to respond to advertiser requirements.
I mean, again, I think that's going to be dependent on the advertiser requirement itself. I think it starts with listening and trying to understand exactly what their objectives are. But there's many different advertiser requirements right now. And I think the biggest thing is efficiencies and making their dollar go farther. So creating incentive programs that help them, you know, maybe get those efficiencies that they're looking for, helping them to have more data-driven campaigns and trying to anchor around the results that we're creating for them as opposed to simply anchoring the conversation around price. I mean, you know, I don't know how many of you guys have seen some of the amazing high impact units that we're building, but those things create an amazing amount of time spent. Viewability is a metric of attention, right? So time spent, engagement, these things are kind of an offshoot of that viewability segment. So we're going to continue to, I'll say, parse our inventory based on quality standards. We're going to continue to invest into, I'll say, new products that solve problems, create time spent and engagement for our partners, and then conversely follow that up with measurement and customer service that's really second to none.
Awesome. And then
also, just one more point, Stacy, and that's, you know, we're also we've gone through great steps to make sure that we have best in class almost everything. So we're tag certified, right? We're focusing on viewability. We're making sure our ads are highly viewable. We have a full in-house creative team that's making these custom unique creatives that we're then deploying across all the websites. And on top of that, you know, we're making sure we're everywhere. So if you think about making sure our direct sales team is in front of all the brands and agencies beyond our normal, you know, meet and greets, our lunch and learns. You know, we've attended the IAB-ALM. We were in CES for Vegas. We're going to be in Cannes. We've sponsored them at every Digiday, Ad Monsters. So we're really trying to make sure we're in front of as many buyers as humanly possible, and we're talking to as many people as humanly possible. So I think the more we champion, you know, our initiatives and what we're doing, the more dollars hopefully will flow through to our partners.
Great. And then we had one more come in, which is you mentioned advertisers are looking for shorter campaigns. Do you think this leads to weaker upfronts? And could weaker upfronts lead to accelerating OTT or CTV ad spend and increasing dollars hitting the programmatic markets?
I think it's a great question. I think annual upfronts are a thing of the past. I think brands want to be more nimble and flexible with how they're deploying their ad spend. That's why they're moving in some parts away from these big bets, these things that they can't get out of because of IAB law kind of governing that. That's why if they are buying, they're maybe more simple and scalable in nature. Things that if the world took a turn, they could get out very easily on 48-hour cancellation notice. So those campaigns, you know, some of them, I'll say in terms of the length of them, can be, you know, normal size. they're still looking at week to week, month to month with flexible cancellation policies. And I think that that's going to continue to remain. Now, something like CTV and OTT, I definitely see budget shifting there. But this is standard video. This is not custom. Again, so that means it's not protected by the IAB from a 30-day out. It's a 48-hour out on those things. So while they know attention is turning to OTT, CTV, and they want to invest there because of, let's say, the lack of linear engagement, net of it is they can still get out of it, and that doesn't make it very predictable for you guys. Did I answer that properly? Stacy, was there any other bits that I don't know, there's 3 parts to that question. So
I think that was covered. Thank you.
Perfect. So I can jump in about what publishers can be doing to help out. Next slide. Apologies, my beard's a little bit longer. I have a newly minted 1-year-old that didn't allow me to leave the house about it. But what can we do? So prioritizing quality over quantity. And one of the first things we always talk about is viewability. Now, it seems so simple that everyone can do that, but there's a lot of different factors that go into it. One is, imagine if you make something viewable, the advertisers look at things in tranches. So you're looking at 60 to 70%, 70 to 80%, 80 to 90. What that means is that one bad ad unit could potentially spoil the bunch. So you're gonna make sure everything's highly viewable. And on top of that, you want to also include scarcity. If you look 7, 8, 9 years ago, one of the things I always heard was, hey, if you throw more ads on, they're gonna make more money. That's not the case anymore. You're actually hurting yourself by doing something like that. So you want to take a strategic approach where you're putting highly viewable ads in there. There's a scarcity to it. There's also other pieces like looking at your floors, making sure that you're, when it's in the open market, you're actually charging what it should be. So when you look at the ad units, that's a big piece of it, but also looking at customizable. When it comes to the standard piece, there's a lot of commoditization of that, the 300 by 250s, the 728 by 90s. You want to be able to, like Anthony Alexander was talking about, come in with customizable units that advertisers are more leaning in towards with something like that. Another piece is supply path optimization. One of the things that we look at is what is the SSP contribution that they're doing? If you put an SSP on there, you're adding latency to your page. You're giving people access to your data, to your users. All that, you better make sure that it's worth it. And so being able to look at each single one and hold their feet to the fire and say, okay, what are you incrementally adding to it? Advertisers don't want 30, 40 to buy in all through 50, 60 different SSPs through supply paths. Someone like us, we want to look and say, okay, how can we cut that down? Maybe it was 15 at the beginning of the year. You want to cut back to 8 to 7, whatever it might be, and make sure that each of them is actually adding incremental value with something like that. One other piece on that one is making sure that when bids are going out, you're not sending anything low quality to the SSPs or advertisers. So bid shaving, I hear it both ways sometimes when I talk to people, but creating that path where if you're sending that low quality bid out into the ecosystem, that ROI is looking bad. So you want to make sure that you're sending high quality bids out there, you have highly viewable, and there's less places to buy. So if you look at mobile web, just something very simple, bad. BTF leaderboard, you go on there, you can't see that. It's not viewable. That's going out to the bids, the SSPs, the DSPs, everything looks bad with something like that. Good, that bottom rail. I hear adhesive, I hear sticky, but it's highly viewable. It's a place advertisers want to be. It's a good user experience, and it's a very clean look with something like that. Other pieces you want to see are maybe lazy loading ads and mobile, as with in article or in content, things like that. Again, focusing on viewability and scarcity with that. Good, question mark. ATF. So historically, that's always been looked at as a good unit. It's not bad, but if you're a user, as soon as that thing loads, I'm scrolling down to see something. So that viewability might come in at 30 to 40%, which isn't great. And again, that is also interfering with other ad units on the page with something like that. One of the things you're able to do is, again, realize with the bottom rail, it's an adhesive / sticky unit that mimics the same mobile behavior on there, good UX, good viewability, good bids that are going out, and just an overall good experience with something.
I have a couple of viewability related questions popping up, but Anthony, I do think before we jump into them, it bears reminding everybody what the definition of viewability is, just to make sure that if we have anybody who's not sure, that it is 100% clear. Which
of the 7 would you like to hear? It depends. I think the simplest one is when 50% is 2 seconds within view. It's looked at as a viewable impression.
Great. So the first one that I've got here is like, are there ad units that I've traditionally used that I should be looking to do away with? And how would I determine which ones those are?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't think there's one unit that you say, oh, don't use this 970. It's a lot about ad placement, location, when you load that ad, how many are on there. So one of the things that we like to do when we work with a new partner is each site is a snowflake. You want to go through and see, okay, where are you loading which ads? Can we be maybe removing some of those with it? Could we replace, if I'm thinking about it, if I have maybe 3 units on there, could I replace it with one adhesive unit that is better user experience and then focus on that viewability and scarcity we keep touching on?
Great. The next question that we've got is what constitutes good viewability? What is the definition? What am I shooting for? And is it on an aggregate basis or is it on a per unit basis that I should be focused?
I would say with most, it's 70% viewability is kind of what they're looking for with there. Obviously 90 plus is great, but I would say that's kind of the starting point with that. Depending on how you send that to the SSPs, typically it's on an aggregate. So that's why it's one, what I said earlier, where if you had one bad viewable unit, it could potentially be skewing viewability across it. So you want to make sure it's as viewable as possible across everything. So again, if you have ones that are loading below the fold, you want to try lazy loading, different things like that to ensure you have the most viewable inventory possible.
Great. Thank you. I think that covers most of our viewability questions that we've got, so we can keep rolling.
All right, so I'm going to speak to a few tools that I think are really useful to publishers these days. I think there's a little bit more pressure on publishers to take advantage of some of this information in this challenging environment. First of all, you want to be thinking more about how users are getting to your site and how that's ultimately tying into your revenue. What marketing campaigns are most successful in driving users? How's organic search factoring in? What do you know about those users? What countries are they coming from? What kind of browsers are they using? That last one is one that matters more and more in a world where the cookie is getting deprecated. If I've got a user who's coming in who's using Safari, that user is less valuable than a user who is using Chrome. Not something you would normally have been thinking about in the past, but now it bears consideration because that second user, that Chrome user, might be twice as valuable to you as that Safari user. How are you going to find that out? You're going to need a tool like, say, a Google Analytics to really appreciate your users, where they're coming from, and what they look like. Unfortunately, Google Analytics has gotten more complicated with the advent of GA4. I know some of you are struggling with that right now, and we think that it's important to figure out your strategy there, figure out how you're going to understand GA yourself or bring somebody in who's going to help you navigate that. Second piece is, well, what kind of content, once users are there, what are they engaging? Which of your writers are getting users in the door and getting them to become those repeat users? What kinds of content are getting people to stay on the page for a while so that they frankly might see an extra ad that they wouldn't have seen if they were gone at 30 seconds? What kind of subject matter is generating the most engagement? How are people moving through your site? These are all things that, again, a tool like, say, a Google Analytics is going to help you understand. But then you have to understand, how is this actually translating into ad revenue? Who is bidding on your site? How much are they bidding? Where are they bidding? Are there certain geolocations that are working better for you than others? You're going to be able to use this data to do things like set price floors, figure out how long your header bidding auction should last. There's a lot of different settings that ultimately you can't understand how to set properly if you're not looking at this data. But most importantly, you need to start putting these different pieces of data together. You want to be able to ask and answer questions like, how does my page view CPM vary depending on the search engine that's being used? Is Bing more valuable to me than Google? If so, then maybe I need to concentrate more on my SEO on that side. What can I do to make it so that I've got more engagement from that kind of user? What about the users that I'm driving from my marketing campaigns? Do I have tools that are letting me take, say, a UTM that's identifying the marketing campaign that I'm running and tie that back to the ultimate page view RPM that I'm deriving from all of this? On the content side, which of these authors are generating the content that the advertisers want to buy on? Not just generating more users, that's important too, but marrying the supply of users who are coming in with the demand. What it is that the advertisers are willing to spend money on, because there are types of content that they're much more interested in. There are types of users that they're much more interested in, and you can't understand that until you put all the tools together to look at those pieces together. So we know that you're probably not used to thinking in this kind of holistic fashion, but it makes a big difference. It's why we've put a lot of effort into rich analytics within our platform, because we've seen that with the publishers who engage with it, it really transforms the way that they approach the business and the kind of revenue that they can drive. Stacey,
I have a couple quick questions. Well, it's really just one question, and it marries the viewability conversation with this one. So Anthony or Nick, feel free to take this. What metrics would you suggest looking at specifically when you're evaluating your ad layout, particularly for viewability, like we discussed in the last section?
There's a lot of them here. I mean, certainly viewability is an extremely important one. So you need to make sure that you've got a tool set in front of you that's going to let you identify that. But going back to some of the things about kind of the site itself, you want to be looking at things like, what is my session duration? How many pages are people ultimately clicking on as they go through the site? Am I in a situation where people are only spending a very short amount of time on one of my pages? If so, I could be shooting myself in the foot, because it might be that by the time the ads load, the user's already gone on to the next page. And that sets me up not only to have missed an opportunity to advertise, but also for an ad to have loaded for such a short and been visible for such a short period of time that those viewability metrics are getting trashed. Those would be some of the things that I would mention offhand. There are a lot of potential metrics to look at. Anthony, I don't know if there's anything else you'd want to add there.
No, I mean, you hit most of them. I would say one of the things is too, as you kind of experiment with different ad layouts, whatever it might be, is to look at things like hidden ads, IVT, overlapping, because we've seen that happen where someone might leave a div somewhere, and then all of a sudden there's a new ad, and that's sending a signal that there's hidden ads there. So just simple things like that, making sure you're able to clean it up.
Great, thank you. I think that covers the answers to our questions that we have open right now, so we will keep going.
So another thing that I want to emphasize is you have access, if you are somebody who's operating your own ad server, to a lot of settings. That thing lets you do a lot. We have a whole yield ops team here at Playwire that spends all day, every day in those settings trying to optimize. If you're not doing that kind of optimization, you are leaving money on the table. That's especially the case these days because buyers have gotten super sophisticated. They are constantly looking for those opportunities where they can score, where they can say, here's an audience that I want to reach, and I'm finding it on the cheap, and they will exploit those holes as much as they possibly can, which means that it's important as a publisher to be sophisticated about pricing in particular. There's lots of other settings that we could talk about. Let's talk about pricing especially. Think about it this way, when you go into the supermarket, you know that the people who are stocking those shelves, who are selling these products, they've thought a lot about the pricing there. They're adjusting these things constantly with supply and demand. Even then, they're not all that sophisticated. I can go to the avocado bin and I can pick around and I can find the best avocado. I'm getting charged on a per pound basis for that thing. It doesn't matter whether that thing is ripe or not, whether it's got spots on it. It's all the same. So as a buyer, I can go in and I can be sophisticated. I can pick out the best stuff. That is what the advertisers are doing too. They're going through your bin right now and they are finding your best avocados and they're leaving the stuff that they don't like just sitting there. What you need to do is you need to set your prices so that when they pick out the best stuff, they're getting charged the highest premium. Well, how do you do that? There's so many factors to take into account. Say, I mentioned country earlier. Well, look, Estonia, I'm sorry, but your CPMs are just not going to be as high as Canada's are. You're going to be looking at things like browser. I mentioned that one earlier too. It's a huge difference between Safari or Firefox, any of these browsers that are blocking cookies currently, and something like Chrome that doesn't. So you ideally want to be getting in there and setting your prices in a way that takes those factors and many other factors into account. But there are a couple of things that most publishers run into. One is that if you're using Google Ad Manager, as a lot of people are, That system only supports 200 price floors. And that sounds like a lot, but once you start saying, I want to pay attention to country, and I want to pay attention to the particular ad unit, and I want to pay attention to the browser, and actually there's 3 or 4 other things I want to pay attention to, you blow that out of the water. The second is, are you going to change those price floors every day? You kind of need to if you want to maximize, because the buyers are changing the way that they buy on a daily basis. But publishers are challenged to keep up with that. So on the Playwire side, this is something we've invested in a lot. We built our own price floor system that uses machine learning in order to infer what those price floors should be and make it so that we're setting those on a per ad request basis. The result is we have over 1 million price floors that we set for every one of our publishers and that we reset on a daily basis. Why would you do this? Sounds really hard. It is, but it's worth it because we've seen an average page view CPM increase of 20% when we have this kind of thing deployed. So that's why price floors are really important. It's why getting in there and optimizing these settings is really important. And I hope you are able to go out there and find ways to lean as much as you possibly can into that subject of getting your pricing right.
I have one question that I think relates to, again, a combination of viewability and these price floor settings. Is there anything that can be done as viewability is improved per some of our other recommendations to increase some of the floors as a result of that?
Absolutely. These things tie together really heavily. If you've got highly viewable inventory, you can set higher price floors. That's the kind of most basic thing. But another thing that happens is because you've created more competition, you can actually over time draw down on the number of SSPs of these platforms that you talk to. There's not as much need to go out and talk to them if the demand or the inventory that you're putting out there is really premium. And that's what's happening when you're driving up viewability. You're creating premium inventory. Buyers are more eager to do it. You don't need to put as many opportunities out there in the form of these SSPs, these bidders, in order to fill that inventory and fill it at great rates. And that in turn has this nice virtuous effect that then you can reduce the number of bidders, you can reduce how much time you need to spend header bidding, and that in turn means that the ads show up sooner, there's less of an impact on the page. So there's a lot of good things that come from that basic move of improving inventory quality. It has all these wonderful knock-on effects.
One other point just to mention is that like the DSPs are actually getting incredibly intelligent, meaning they're looking for weaknesses. So if you're plugged into 10, 20, however many SSPs you are, they're looking for the cheapest, most efficient way to buy that inventory. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars being pumped into all this technology. It's on the buy side. How can they buy you for as cheap as possible? How can they get efficiencies? As a matter of fact, some of the partners, I'm not going to say who they are rewarded for actually buying the inventory more cheaper and then sharing the profit with us, however much they can save the advertiser. So everything that we built really is to kind of combat all those things. How can we push up those rates? And I know Nick kind of glossed over this or kind of just said it very, in a Nick-esque way, but we literally went from 200 price floors to over 1 million per website that are changed every single day. So that means there's a price point, per ad size, per country, per operating system, per dimension, per blah, 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 all the way down. So it's pretty amazing what him and his team have created. And the beauty is the machines are now making these changes, not humans. And they're smarter than us. They can learn faster. There's no way we could ever be able to manage this type of exposure, this many price points. So, I know we kind of touched on it, but I really wanted to hone in on that one specific point.
We have one more question here, which I think, Anthony, would be great if you jump in on, which is after removing low viewability units from a site, how long should a publisher expect to wait before seeing the full impact of the overall viewability change? And the reason I bring it up here is because it does kind of relate to our price floor controller.
No, that's a great question. I would say typically it's about 2 to 3 weeks where you're going to see a decrease in revenue. I would say maybe the 10 to 20% while you get re-indexed, looking at the viewability across the different sources on there. And then you really get to see the benefits of those increased viewable units. Then from there, it's like Nick said, that's the first piece of it. then you have to make sure you're doing the flooring and all those different to get the maximum benefits from it.
Anthony, maybe it might be interesting to share with the group, like just some of the findings that we've had. Like, so this doesn't, that time frame you said does not work for all sites, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So that I want to be typical. I don't want to give outliers or something like that, but we have seen people actually, when they make that change, within 2 days see an uplift in overall page view CPM, which is the one metric we look at, or session CPM, how much revenue you're actually making against your audience with that. So within 2 or 3 days, you can actually see an uplift if done correctly. And then you see and all the other benefits of obviously more revenue, but you cut down on ad calls, less latency, all those benefits that you get for users and the site itself.
Great. I think that answers the questions that we had at this moment. So we'll keep chugging through.
Last thing I wanted to talk about is using your data, and here we mean using your user data, your audience data. So a lot of you are sitting on gold, frankly. You know, you're sitting on really important information about your users that, whether it's advertisers or other entities, they really care about this information. But it's a lot of work to take that information that's sitting in a database somewhere, or that maybe you're not even collecting right now, and to make it available in a way where you can actually translate it into revenue. So here are the steps that I would suggest that you be thinking about. One is you're going to need a way to organize that data into audiences, and that's because that's how the industry transacts. They want to see a group of users, anonymous users, who have all been packaged together and who all share some sort of characteristic. Maybe they love anime, maybe they're outdoor lovers, something like this. And packaging is its own interesting challenge. There are systems out there called data management platforms that are designed in part to allow you to do this kind of thing. So if this is a direction you want to go, I would heavily encourage you to look into a data management platform. If you're already working with Playwire, we have our own data management platform, so you don't need to worry about that. Second, you need to take the information, take those audiences, and you need to establish a linkage with the data marketplaces. So data marketplaces are, I guess, kind of what they sound like. They are these places that you can go where you can access audiences and access them in a way that's actionable for you. So maybe you are an advertiser and you are just looking to target your ad campaigns. Or maybe you're an advertiser and you're looking to take some data that you already have on some users and merge it with somebody else's data set. So maybe, you know, you've got a bunch of toys that you want to market, and you already know that people have an interest in buying this general class of toy, but you're very focused on anime at the moment. And so you want to say, okay, where can I get an anime data set that qualifies these users and says, these are the people who are not only toy interested, but they're anime interested. Data marketplaces are a place that an advertiser can go, and they can access those audiences and use them for targeting or data merging purposes. So that means you need to forge relationships with these. These are folks like, say, a LiveRamp, for example. Third, you need to enable those marketplaces to sell your data. What does that mean? Well, you have to figure out how to price it. You have to figure out how to describe it. You ideally have a team out there who's going out and helping to sell as well, because it's one thing to put something on a shelf, and occasionally an advertiser will come and they'll just buy something off that marketplace's shelf. But what really matters is if you are forming relationships with those folks, you're showing them what you have on the shelves, you're selling them on it. There's a whole marketing exercise that's associated with this. Now, all of this is going to get you in a lot of trouble, though, unless you're thinking about privacy from the get-go. Look, we're talking about, in some cases, personally identifiable information. We're certainly talking about information that users are not necessarily excited about sharing unless they understand why it's being shared and they have some way to withdraw your ability to offer. So that means that you need to understand the legislation here. You need to understand what it takes to comply, what you're going to need to do with your privacy policies, things like this. This is another thing that on the Playwire side, as with everything else on the slide, we take care of for you. Big one here, email addresses. So if we go back in time a few years, everybody was identifying and tracking users based on cookies, which is part of why we have all this privacy legislation. The new change within the industry is an increased focus on emails as identifiers. Some of you may be familiar with this. I'm not sure everybody here is. What you need to be able to do these days, if you really want to maximize the value of your data, and especially make it bulletproof as we're heading into the cookieless era, is to be able to gather email addresses from your users. And then you need to be able to anonymize those email addresses by hashing them. What does that mean? It basically means you're taking the email and you're encrypting it. But you're encrypting it in a way where I encrypt it, another entity encrypts their version of the email, and where we can compare the two later and we can see it's still the same person, still the same email address, even if neither one of us can actually read that email address anymore. That encryption is what protects you, puts you in a situation where you're not constantly worried about whether a hacker's going to come in, download all those email addresses and have access to all of your users, while at the same time allowing these data marketplaces to function, because they have this way of saying, oh yeah, it's the same person. I saw them here, I saw them here. I can take the information I got here, I got the information here, and merge them together. By doing this, by being able to harvest these email addresses and understand how to hash them and how to associate them with your audiences, with those audiences that I described at the beginning, that's how you're able to put together a fully fledged cookie-proof solution for audience data that's going to set you up to increase revenue, not just now, but in the future. Increase revenue because you've got more effective direct ad sales taking place, but also because some people are coming in and they're actually directly paying for access to that data.
We have a good question that seems like the right time to throw in right now, which is, what is a good way to cookie proof when you do not want to collect user emails? For instance, on a website with articles, but no user interactivity, excuse me.
There's a limit to how far you can go with it. One of the things that we've done at Playwire is that we also have a version of our audience segments, of our DMP, that's based upon fingerprinting. Fingerprinting is a technique where you're looking at the browser and you're saying, there are a lot of unique characteristics about the browser. Let's understand how the user is moving through the web based upon that. But that's not as good a mechanism as the email address. First of all, it doesn't always work. Second of all, some people are concerned about the privacy implications of that. Frankly, I think all of these things have privacy implications, which is why it's so important that you're making sure that you understand what privacy law allows and what sort of safeguards you need to put in place with things like your privacy policy on your website. But ultimately, if you're not willing to harvest emails in some fashion, to give incentives to users to share their email with you, over time, this is going to hurt you. Over time, you're going to see some degree of erosion in the kind of dollars that are being spent, as well as your ability to leverage any of the data that you're collecting and share it within some of these data marketplaces. There are data marketplaces already, in fact, most of them, that will not allow data to be shared that's based upon fingerprints. They also don't let you share that data if it's based upon the cookie. They've already said it needs to be something like some piece of personally identifiable information, like an email address. Hashed, they never want to see it, nobody ever wants to see it, but they need something that they can key off of that is really tied directly back to the user. So you need to think about what it is as a publisher ultimately that's going to allow you to, identify the user, identify them uniquely, and in a world where the cookie is going away, the email address is what's heavily being emphasized.
And Anthony, this might be a good time as well to layer in some of the creative solutions we've seen publishers take in lieu of having an actual login, but other ways to collect emails that might be simple and easy for even article-based sites.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just making sure there's some value behind it. So I've seen ones with people doing like quizzes or whatever that might be, or hey, do not want ads for 5 days, enter your email address here. I've seen that one as a popular one as well. Or to comment within the site, you have to enter your email address. Those different types of ways I seem probably the best working.
Great, thanks. All right, we'll keep moving through.
Awesome. So Thanks, Stacy, and thanks all the panelists. So basically, if you think about what I said earlier today, you know, the DSPs are trying to buy your inventory as cheaply as possible. There's been erosion of CPMs year over year. Cookies are going away. You have all these external forces kind of pushing down on us. So the question is, you know, what are we So we kind of talked about a few things you can do for yourself, right? Get more email addresses, email hashing to kind of make sure you have addressability. Make sure your ads are more in view, right? Then when Anthony Alexander talked about the higher viewable units, make sure it's 70% viewability, and all these other little things that add up. But what is Playwire personally doing to what are we doing to prevent these things or give you a softer landing? We're going to go through some of the products that we built or are building that should be done by Q2. And if you're currently a customer, you're already taking advantage of some of these things. And if you're not, we're more than willing to talk to you about what those things will be. So what is happening at RAMP? So RAMP is our platform. It stands for Revenue Amplification Management Platforms. Basically, it's our brain. It's our systems to manage all of the tools and systems to help you generate more revenue and run your business more efficiently. So the first thing we developed is something called revenue intelligence, or RI is what we call. That's really the logic, the machine learning, the AI. If you're on our platform, you're already taking advantage of these things. And that's why you're seeing a softer landing than someone who may not be using this. A big thing was a price floor controller, right? 200 price rules to over 1 million plus price rules, our PFC. That's a brand new product. It's in the market. We're actively using it. So that means the machines are actively updating all your price floors, your configurations, your bidder timeout rates, et cetera, et cetera. Another tool that we've rolled out recently is called our Advanced Yield Analytics. So for those of you who do not know, GA4, the new one, is incredibly confusing. I mean, I'm a developer by trade back, a long time ago, and I had a hard time trying to figure this out. So what we did, we tried to come up with a simple solution that anyone can understand. What does good look like? How do I easily determine, am I making more, am I making less? Is it my performance better or is my performance worse? So what we did is we married up GAM 360 with Google Analytics. And normally, for whatever reason why, Google does not allow those two to talk to one another. So we took painstakingly a tremendous amount of efforts, and we painstakingly put these things together so you could literally, with a click of a button, understand my page view, gross page view CPM, net page view CPM, click rate, viewability, IVT, all these things in one very easy WYSIWYG. What's coming in Q2, or if not sooner, is a self-service ad platform. So you want to serve your own ads, either your own house ads, a campaign you sold yourself, anything that you want to do, we're giving you the ability to do so. The technology we built is on top of GAM 360. So it's really just passing these variables through an API, sitting on top of our GAM 360, but giving you full control and transparency of what's going on. Monitoring and alerting, set up as many alerts as you want to monitor what's going on. Do I want to know if my page view dropped? Did I make more money? Are my click rates lower? And you'll be able to get emails, alerts, text messages, all kind of different ways that you'll be able to navigate and understand what's going on in real time on your website. So you don't have to kind of monitor everything as this goes along. And the last one's data sales. So as Nick had mentioned earlier, we're starting to get into the data business. We're aggregating all this data. We're piping it into all these marketplaces, and hopefully that'll be a new revenue stream for some of our partners. So again, these are just some of the things that we're actively working on that we can share that are coming out in the next month or two. There's a lot more that we're working on that's behind the scenes, but everything that we build, every technology we develop, every product we sell is always in the best interest of you, the publisher. You are our client. You're the ones we're fighting for day in and day out. The next product I want to talk to, we have our Chief Product Officer who's been pretty quiet, so I'm going to let Noah Forrester kind of talk to the next few slides. So Noah, what else are we building?
Yeah, absolutely. So we continue to develop our SDK for app. So this is the entire ad monetization stack, everything that we've talked about for web, increasing the competition within your ad stack. It is that solution for app as well. So we've got 15 years of header bidding experience. We're combining header bidding, mediation, and our direct sales demand all through one set of pipes to drive up maximum revenue within your app. We've also just very recently, in fact, just over the past couple of weeks, introduced a new ad format that we call the Flex Skin. So this is a high impact high yield, directly sold ad format. It's incremental as well. So it's a great way to reduce ad clutter actually on your site. It looks fantastic. Users like this format from the feedback that we've heard, and it also unlocks exclusive campaigns. So we would highly encourage that any of our publishers, if they haven't already, reach out to their account manager about getting this format activated. It also only shows up when there's a campaign to run. So it's a great one to add to your, and you know, of course, if you're trying to drive viewability and engagement, this is a great format to do that.
So once I have the code on the page, it will only show up when there's a direct campaign to sell. If not, it will just stay dormant in the background.
That's precisely right.
Great.
And Noah, how does this interact with other adhesive units?
Absolutely. So any adhesive units that you may have active in the rails of the site, that is the left and right side of the site, will automatically be deactivated when this comes on. So you won't get any of that ugly ad overlap, nothing to worry about there. All right, rewarded video, this one's exciting. So for those of you who don't already know, this rewarded video is a large format overlay style video ad that rewards users for watching a video on your site. While this is commonplace in app, it's not been available for websites until very recently, right? And so what we're looking at here is web rewarded video. The way the process works, just in a nutshell, is a user on your site is offered a reward for watching an ad unit. So the user clicks a button to accept that offer. An overlay opens on top of the site content and the video ad plays. And when that video ad ends, the user is returned that promised reward. So it's a great unit. Here, it's everybody wins in this situation. So audiences, game players tend to favor these types of ads because they understand that there's a value exchange involved. And because advertisers know that users tend to engage with these ads, they're engaged, they're watching, they are completing the ad as well. They're willing to offer a premium CPM. So again, a great way to drive up CPM, drives up viewability on your inventory as well. There is the question of who can use these. So because there is a little bit of a particular publisher fit. Certainly if you have games, this is an easy one, right? You can offer users an additional life when they've run out of lives in your game. But you can also use this to unlock additional content. So imagine that I run a site and I have a freemium style model. I can lock a article or the full article behind a barrier, behind a rewarded ad. If the user engages with a video, watches that video to completion, I can then unlock that article for them. It's a great unit.
So basically, if you have any kind of content and you want to gate that content, it's a download, it's a PDF, it's an install, it's a game, it's, hey, I want to get rid of ads, watch this rewarded video. It could be anything. This is a great way for a value exchange where, hey, I'm going to give you something for free, but you got to watch this ad. And so far, we've seen amazing results from it, right? So the CPMs are through the roof, number one. But number two, users don't mind this value exchange. So it's a really good win-win situation. Thanks, Noah. So I know, I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We're at the 1 hour mark. I appreciate everyone stopping by. We hope you learned a little bit or a lot. And if not, please feel free to ask anyone after the fact. Any question, reach out to your account manager, reach out to us at Playwire, stop by our website, look at our knowledge base, read some of our articles, and remember, everyone, just have a great Valentine's Day because we love ad tech. So have a good day, everybody.